The hum of the tires against the asphalt was the only thing keeping me awake. I was deep into a 12-hour haul across the high plains, a stretch of land where the horizon is just a black void and the stars feel uncomfortably close. My route was a shortcut through a series of county highways that didn't even have names on some maps, just numbers. I hadn't seen another set of headlights in over 3 hours. The silence of the plains is heavy. It's the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're the last person left on Earth. To break the monotony, I reached over and clicked on the CB radio. At first, it was just the usual white noise, the static of the universe. But then a rhythmic clicking started. 3 clicks, a pause, then 3 more. It sounded mechanical, deliberate. I adjusted the squelch, thinking it was just interference from a distant power line. But then a voice cut through. It wasn't the gravelly tone of a fellow trucker. It was thin, high-pitched, and sounded like it was being squeezed through a narrow pipe. "The silver bird is losing its feathers," the voice whispered. I looked at my truck, a polished silver semi-cab. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I grabbed the mic, my thumb hovering over the button. I asked if anyone was on the line, my voice sounding small in the cabin. No one answered, just that rhythmic clicking. 3 clicks, pause, 3 clicks. 10 miles later, I saw a flicker of light in the distance. It was a single amber light, pulsing on the side of the road. As I got closer, I realized it was a roadside emergency phone, one of those old-fashioned yellow boxes you rarely see anymore. The light on top was flashing in time with the clicking on my radio. 3 flashes, pause, 3 flashes dot as I passed it. The radio erupted in a burst of static so loud I had to tear the headset off. Through the noise I heard the thin voice again, much clearer this time. "Silverbird, why didn't you pick up? The collector is waiting." I didn't slow down. I pushed the pedal harder, the engine roaring in protest. My GPS, which had been steady all night, suddenly flickered. The blue line representing the road turned into a chaotic scribble, spinning in circles before the screen went entirely black. Then I saw the construction zone. There were no signs leading up to it. No orange barrels, no road work ahead. Just a sudden forest of high wooden barricades painted in black and white stripes, funneling the 2 lanes down into one narrow corridor. I had no choice but to follow the path. The wooden walls were so high I couldn't see over them, and they were so close to the sides of my truck that I could hear the mirrors, occasionally brushing against them with a sickening scrape. The road began to slope downward. I knew this area. It was supposed to be flat, but I was descending into a trench. The walls on either side weren't wood anymore. They were raw earth and jagged rock. That's when I saw the sedan dot. It was parked sideways across the narrow path, blocking it completely. It was a vintage model, painted a flat, light-absorbing black. Its headlights were off, but the interior light was on. Inside, I could see a figure sitting in the driver's seat, perfectly still. They weren't looking at the road. They were looking straight up at the roof of the car. I slammed on the brakes, the semi skidding to a halt just feet from the car's door. I waited for the driver to move, to wave, to do anything. Nothing. I honked the horn a blast that should have shaken the windows of that sedan, but the figure didn't even flinch. I reached for my door handle, intending to get out and see if they were conscious, but the CB radio crackled back to life. "Don't open the cage," the thin voice said. "The collector wants to see how long you can stay inside." I looked out my side window. Standing on the lip of the trench 20 feet above me were 3 figures. They were tall, impossibly thin, wearing long coats that blurred into the darkness. They weren't looking at me. They were looking at the sedan. Suddenly, the sedan's back door swung open. No one got out, but the car began to shake. It wasn't a mechanical vibration. It was like something was thrashing inside the frame. The metal began to groan and dent outward from the inside. I didn't wait to see what was coming out. I threw the truck into reverse. A semi isn't meant to fly backward down a narrow earth-walled trench in total darkness, but I didn't care. I pushed it until I hit something solid. I looked in my camera feed. Another black sedan had pulled in behind me, sealing the exit. I was trapped. I locked both doors and grabbed the heavy tire iron I kept under my seat. I watched the figures on the ridge. They began to climb down the steep walls of the trench, moving with a jerky spider-like gait. They didn't have flashlights. They didn't need them. One of them reached my driver's side window. I finally saw its face. It wasn't a face. It was a mask made of stitched-together pieces of reflective road signs. In the glare of my cabin lights, the mask glowed with a blinding, flickering intensity. It tapped on the glass. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. I picked up my phone to call for help, but the screen didn't show a signal bar. It showed a message in the Notes app that I hadn't typed. "The road ends here because we stopped building IT." The figure at the window leaned in close, its reflective face pressing against the glass. It started to speak, but the sound didn't come from its mouth. It came from my truck's own speakers. "You missed your exit, Silverbird. You've been driving on the vein for miles." The truck began to tilt. I realized the earth beneath the tires was softening, turning into a thick, tar-like sludge. The semi was sinking. I looked back at the sedan in front of me. The thing that had been thrashing inside was finally emerging. It was a pale, hairless arm, reaching out of the door, stretching unnaturally long, groping the air for the front of my truck. I did the only thing I could think of. I turned off my headlights. I turned off the cabin lights. I shut down the engine. I sat in total, absolute darkness. The tapping stopped. The clicking on the radio ceased. I sat there for what felt like hours, breathing as shallowly as possible. I could hear them whispering outside, a sound like dry leaves blowing across pavement. They were discussing my mileage. They were talking about my parts. "He's gone dark," the thin voice said right outside my door. "The silver bird went to sleep." "Wake him up," another voice replied. I felt a massive weight hit the roof of the cab. The metal buckled inward. A seam popped near the sunroof, and a faint smell of ozone and old copper filled the air. A thin, needle-like probe poked through the gap, waving around like an insect's antenna. I knew if it touched me, it was over. I shifted slowly, sliding onto the floorboards, pressing myself into the smallest space possible. The probe retracted, and I heard the figures moving away, back toward the sedans. "The next one is closer," one of them said. "A red one, with more cargo." The sound of the sedan's engine starting up was strange. It didn't sound like internal combustion. It sounded like a low-frequency hum that vibrated in my teeth. I heard the vehicles move away, and the heavy presence above me vanished. I waited until the sun began to bleed a dull gray light over the horizon before I dared to look out the window. The trench was gone. The high barricades were gone. My truck was sitting in the middle of an abandoned, weed-choked rest area that looked like it hadn't seen a customer in 30 years. The sludge I had been sinking into was just old, cracked asphalt. I got out of the truck, my legs shaking so badly I nearly collapsed. I walked around to the front. There, etched into the grime on my silver hood, were 3 words, "See you Midwest." I climbed back in and drove. I didn't stop for fuel. I didn't stop for coffee. I drove until I hit a major interstate with bright lights and heavy traffic. When I finally reached my destination and pulled into the loading dock, the foreman asked me why I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I didn't answer. I just walked to the front of my truck and looked at the roof. There, in the center of the reinforced steel cab, were 3 deep, perfectly circular indentations. And stuck in the seam of the metal was a single, small piece of reflective yellow plastic, a shard from a road sign. I don't take the back roads anymore. I don't care if the highway takes 3 hours longer. Because sometimes when the static on the radio gets too loud, I can still hear those 3 clicks. And I know they're still out there, building roads that lead to nowhere, waiting for the next silver bird to miss its turn.